Dr. Evil, while you were frozen, we began a program to clone you.
Cool. Send in the clone!
He is exactly like you in every way except half your size.
Breathtaking. I shall call it Mini-Me. Wow, this thing is tiny. The Fenix 3HR and 5X have been my daily drivers for about 18 months now, and coming from those rather large watches, I was absolutely blown away at the small size and weight of the 5S when I first picked it up. They basically crammed everything from the super popular 3HR into this tiny little case, all while adding a few features and making things a lot snappier. And I have to say that this thing is kind of amazing. Some people say that this watch was intended for women. Sure, maybe if you get the white or silver version, like this one with a turquoise band, but I have to disagree and say that the black version of the 5S would be completely appropriate for anyone with a smaller wrist or if you just prefer a smaller watch. If I didn't come directly from the equivalent of basically a satellite dish on my wrist, I would say that the 5S fits just fine. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the 5X along with the 5S on my 7 3/4 inch wrist. And here's a side-by-side comparison of the 5S along with the 5X on the woman's wrist. As you can see, on an average sized wrist, the 5S is totally wearable, and other than the color, I don't think the size makes it look like a women's specific watch at all. However, the most dramatic comparison is on the woman's wrist, where you can see the 5X is downright enormous on her smaller wrist. The 18-gram weight difference is actually quite noticeable from the 5 to the 5S, and even more dramatic coming from the 5X, which is 31 grams or 50% heavier. Both the 5S and 5 stay put fairly well, unlike the 5X, which tends to bounce around a little bit unless you tighten down the strap tighter than a nurse checking your blood pressure. Unfortunately, there is a big compromise with the smallest of the 5 series, and that's going to be battery life. It only gets 9 days of standby or smartwatch mode compared to the 12 to 14 days of the 5 and 5X respectively. Ultra track mode is on par with the 5X at 35 hours, but it can't hold a candle to the regular 5 with almost double the runtime. GPS with Heartrate will get you 14 hours, which is much lower than the 5 or 5X, but I think that's still plenty of life, especially compared to the competitors. GPS and Heartrate performance are as to be expected. GPS worked great, and the wrist-based optical heart rate works fairly well unless you got a faulty unit, which has been reported but seems to be very rare. You'll still have some heart rate inconsistencies with certain activities, but just wear a heart rate strap if you really want very accurate results. It's just the nature of wrist-based optical heart rate sensors. Feel free to check out some of my other Fenix review videos for some in-depth information on that. The buttons seem to have a little bit less resistance in the 5S compared to the 5X and 3HR. I already accidentally press the buttons on my 5X occasionally, so I could see accidental presses occurring a little bit more on the 5S. The bezel has a significantly lower profile, and it doesn't have the external screws or notches like on the large width bezels of the 5 or 5X. It also has a ribbed edge on the inside of the bezel, which I think wasn't the best design decision. However, without it, the black version could be easily mistaken for a 935, so they probably had to do it to distinguish it. Although the screen is small, it's still totally usable and works for quick glances if you don't have a ton of data fields displayed. I tried a few third-party data screens with more than 4 fields and have to say that it can be tough to read with a lower resolution screen. It only has a 218 by 218 pixel display compared to the 240 by 240 on the 5 and 5X. Just like the 5 and 5X, the interface is super snappy compared with the 3HR and didn't have a much additional lag with data-intensive third-party widgets from the Connect IQ store. So I have to say that I'm super impressed with this tiny little Fenix. Its size is on par with a small, regular watch, all while packing in the kitchen sink, except for mapping, which is only available on the 5X. If you're someone coming from a smaller activity tracker like a VivoFit HR or Fitbit, this is going to be an easy transition and a big upgrade to something that actually looks like a watch with a ton more functionality in a much more durable case. So the Fenix 5S is definitely highly recommended for anyone with a smaller wrist that wants the best-in-class activity tracker, all while having some pretty killer looks. Thanks so much for watching. If you don't mind, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for a lot more videos coming soon.